The courtroom was colder than I had imagined. The dull hum of whispers seemed to settle like a fog around me, heavy and suffocating. My back straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap, I tried to hold on to some semblance of composure as I watched my daughter, Arletha, stand with her lawyer. They were painting me as an unfit mother, someone too old, too poor, and too invisible to take care of my grandson. I felt the weight of the years pressing against me. Each moment in that sterile room a sharp reminder of all the times I had given up parts of myself for my children. And now, here I was, alone. The very person who had sacrificed everything to make sure they had what they needed, being mocked and belittled. Arletha's voice rang out, filled with venom, her words cutting deeper than I could have ever expected. My mother is not someone you can trust. She's weak, she's barely able to care for herself, let alone raise a child. She turned to her lawyer, their brief exchange a silent agreement to continue this smear campaign, and all I could do was sit there, too numb to respond. I had tried so hard for so long to be enough. I felt the sting of her cruelty, a fresh wound that made my chest tighten. But as the words from her mouth swirled in my mind, I remembered another time, years ago, when Arletha had mocked me in front of the whole family during another custody dispute. It wasn't the first time she had dismissed everything I had done for her, everything I had ever given. She was like that, dismissive of me, of the sacrifices I made. It hurt, but I had learned to swallow it down. She wasn't the only one. The memories came flooding back, unbidden and sharp. I had given up my career to raise my children. I spent years working low-paying jobs, always just getting by, never getting the respect I deserved. I thought of Clayton, my ex-husband, who had never been emotionally present, always distant. It was as if I had been raising the kids by myself while he got to remain detached, living his life without consequence. I remembered the family gatherings, those rare moments when we were all together. Arletha, still a teenager, would roll her eyes whenever I asked her to help. I'd give her all I had, my time, my energy, my love. But it was never enough for her. The resentment she carried for me was as plain as day. And yet, I was still there for her, still trying, hoping for some kind of acknowledgement. I recalled a painful moment. I had been so sick, so overwhelmed by everything, and when I asked Arletha for help, she refused. She wouldn't even lend me a hand. Instead, she shrugged me off and went on with her life. I was left to deal with everything alone, just like always. As I sat in that courtroom, I could feel the familiar sting of neglect. My thoughts swirled, a mix of frustration and helplessness. Arletha's words felt like daggers, but I stayed silent because that's all I had ever known how to do. Stay silent. I thought about how little they all saw me, not just Arletha, but the rest of my family too. I had been the caregiver, the one who sacrificed, who gave, but they never looked at me as an equal. To them, I was just the background, the invisible. I felt the years of bitterness welling up in my chest like a tide that was too strong to hold back. But I stayed silent. I didn't speak out like I wanted to. I just took it, like I always had. But then, just as I was about to sink deeper into my silence, something changed. A spark of memory flared up inside me, something from the past that made me realize I was stronger than this. I had been through so much, and I had overcome more than they would ever know. I remembered a time when I had been completely alone, fighting a battle no one even knew about. I hadn't asked for help, I hadn't expected anything from anyone. I had pulled myself out of the dark simply because I had no other choice. For the first time, I felt that spark ignite again. I wasn't going to let them break me down anymore. This wasn't just about me being a mother, about me fighting for my son's custody. It was about standing up for myself. The courtroom was still. I stood, gathering myself, and slowly, I turned to face Arletha. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the invisible woman. I wasn't the mother who had to apologize for existing. I spoke, my voice measured, but firm. You think I'm unfit? You think I can't care for my son? You think I'm just a shadow in this family? My words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything I had ever swallowed down. And then, with quiet precision, I said something that no one saw coming, something about Arletha's past, a detail she had never expected anyone to know. She froze. I could see it in her eyes, that brief flash of shock. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. For the first time, I was not going to sit back and take it. I wasn't going to allow her to make me invisible anymore. The courtroom was silent. Arletha opened her mouth, then closed it. Her lawyer looked at her, their brief exchange filled with unspoken tension. But I didn't wait for their response. I didn't need to. I had already said what needed to be said. The judge called for a recess. I stepped outside, my mind racing, but my heart felt lighter. This was just the beginning. But for once, I felt like I had finally started to take back control. The air outside the courtroom was cool, carrying a sense of quiet finality that matched the heavy silence hanging over me. The recess had been a brief respite, but I could still hear Arletha's voice echoing in my mind. Her words about me, about our family, gnawed at my insides like a slow-burning fire. Unfit, weak, invisible. Those words were meant to break me, but I refused to let them. Sitting in the car, staring out the window, I tried to collect myself. I could feel the weight of the years pressing against my chest. Years of sacrifice, of giving everything and getting nothing in return. But despite the heaviness, there was a flicker of something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. My mother's voice, so clear in my memory, whispered in my ear, "If you don't stand for yourself, no one will." I had heard those words 1,000 times, but today they felt different. For the first time in a long time, they didn't just resonate, they ignited something inside me. Maybe it was time to stand up. For myself. Later that afternoon, I found myself in a small diner across from Martha. She was the one person who had always been there, no questions asked. I hadn't seen her in years, but the minute we sat down, it was like no time had passed. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air as we exchanged stories about our lives. Martha's eyes were kind, understanding. She asked, "Viola, have you ever thought about standing up for yourself against Arletha? I mean, really standing up, not just taking it?" I hesitated. The thought had crossed my mind, but every time I considered it, I was paralyzed by fear. Fear of confrontation, of losing control, of pushing away the only family I had left. I had always been the one who kept the peace, the one who swallowed my hurt and carried on. But Martha wasn't about to let me off that easy. She leaned in, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "You know, I once had to stand up to someone in my own family, someone who took advantage of me. I was terrified at first, but then I realized I was losing myself, and I wasn't going to let that happen anymore." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd always admired Martha's strength, her ability to stand her ground. She didn't take crap from anyone. Maybe, just maybe, I could do the same. Maybe it was time to stop letting Arletha walk all over me. "I will," I said, the words barely a whisper, but there was something new in my voice, something firm, something I hadn't heard in years. "I will take a stand, not just for my son, but for me." The evening was quiet. I sat at home, staring out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. The weight of the day still lingered, but there was a shift in me, a change I couldn't quite put into words. I reflected on everything I had given up over the years. My career, my dreams, my time, all for my children. And what did I have to show for it? A daughter who dismissed me at every turn, a son I could barely reach, and a life defined by sacrifice. But as I sat there, I realized something. I was more than just a mother. I was more than just a caretaker. I had spent so much of my life defined by the roles others had assigned me that I forgot who I was beneath all of that. I was a woman with dreams, with desires, with strength. I had forgotten that somewhere along the way, but I was starting to remember. I looked into the mirror, my own reflection staring back at me. For the first time in a long time, I spoke softly to myself, my voice steady and sure. "I am more than what they see. It's time for me to be more." The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror again. The reflection was the same, but somehow I was different. The courtroom awaited, and I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about the custody case anymore. This was about me finding my voice, about standing up for everything I had let slip away. For years, I had swallowed my hurt, my anger, and my disappointment, but no more. Today I would fight, not just for my son, but for myself. The courtroom felt like an entirely different place now. The silence wasn't suffocating. It was empowering. As Arletha launched into her usual tirade accusing me of being unfit, of being the reason everything was wrong in the family, I stood tall. Her words no longer had the sting they once did. This time I didn't shrink away. I didn't flinch. I responded, my words sharp, precise, and calm. You think I'm unfit? You think I can't take care of my son? I could feel the power in my voice, the confidence I hadn't known I was capable of. And then I dropped the bombshell, a detail about Arletha's past that no one expected me to know. For the briefest moment, the courtroom went silent. Arletha's face paled, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't know how to respond. I didn't look away. This was my moment. The judge called for a recess, and as I stepped outside, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. This wasn't the end of the battle, not by a long shot, but it was a victory. My victory. I had found my voice, and for the first time in years, I wasn't hiding behind silence. The morning after my small victory in the courtroom, I woke up with a sense of both relief and trepidation. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, feeling the wind against my face, but knowing the ground below was still too far away to touch. My hands shook slightly as I reached for the coffee mug on the nightstand. The steam curled upward, but the warmth did little to soothe the anxiety building in my chest. Yesterday, I had fought back. I had spoken. But today, the reality of what I'd done was sinking in. Arletha wasn't just going to let that go. I knew that. She wouldn't give up her fight so easily, not with so much at stake. And now, the battle was only beginning. The calm before the storm felt like a heavy silence, a moment to breathe before the next round came crashing in. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the silence envelop me. Every interaction with Arletha from now on would be charged with this tension. Her every word, every glance would feel like a challenge, a threat. But I wasn't about to back down, not anymore. I remembered the way my mother used to say, "If you don't stand for yourself, no one will." It echoed in my mind now, louder than ever before. My mother had taught me to be strong, to fight silently and wisely, to pick my battles. She had never raised her voice, but when she spoke, people listened. I used to wonder how she did it, how she stayed so calm when everything around her was falling apart. But now, I understood. She was showing me how to stay strong without saying a word. I took a deep breath and opened my eyes. It was time to face the next chapter. The day passed slowly. I spent most of it in a haze, my thoughts consumed by what had happened and what would come next. My hands trembled as I cleaned the house, my mind racing through the possibilities of what Arletha would do. I kept thinking back to all the sacrifices I had made. Every dream I put aside, every piece of my life I gave up. My children should have been grateful for all I'd done, but instead, I was left feeling invisible, a mere shadow of the woman I once was. But as the hours passed, a realization began to take root in my heart. I had allowed myself to be defined by others for far too long. I had spent my life being the mother, the caretaker, never daring to dream of being anything more. And now it was time to change that. I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman with my own needs, my own desires. I reflected on a conversation I had with my late sister, someone who had always supported me. She once told me, "Viola, you have every right to live for yourself. Don't lose yourself in the service of others." Her words were like a light shining through the dark. I had forgotten how to live for myself, but now I was starting to remember. Later that evening, the phone rang. I picked it up without thinking, but the voice on the other end made my heart race. It was an anonymous caller, their voice muffled but clear. They had information about Arletha, something that could shake her entire world. "They're hiding something," the voice said. "Arletha's been involved in something criminal, something that could end her in court." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know if I should trust the caller or not. The voice was familiar, but the name they gave me, someone from my past, left me wondering if this was a trap. But then they mentioned something specific about Arletha, a detail I knew all too well, something no one else could have known. The caller had my attention. "I'll meet you," I said, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside me. The caller gave me an address and a time, and I hung up, feeling both hopeful and fearful. This could change everything. Or it could be a lie. I met the mysterious caller in a quiet park, far from the prying eyes of the world. The figure waiting for me was an old acquaintance of Clayton's. Their face was shadowed, but the words that came out of their mouth were clear. Arletha has been hiding things, financial dealings, shady business ventures. You could use this to your advantage. The details were chilling. Arletha, my daughter, involved in tax evasion, in illegal transactions, things that could destroy her credibility in court. I wanted to feel vindicated, to be the one to finally expose her. But then, the warning came. Using this could be dangerous. It could endanger your family, especially your son. The weight of the decision hit me. I had always tried to protect my children, always made sure they were safe, even at the cost of my own happiness. But now, this choice wasn't just about me. It was about them too. If I used this information, would it destroy what little I had left of my family? Was I willing to risk it? As I walked back to my car, my mind was in a whirlwind. I had the power to destroy Arletha. The information was mine, a key that could turn the tide in my favor. But the consequences, what would they be? I stood there for a moment, staring at the road ahead. I had been pushed to the edge, and now I had to decide. Would I use this power to fight back, to take control? Or would I walk away and continue on my own path without turning my family into collateral damage? I couldn't deny it any longer. This was my moment. The time had come to reclaim my dignity, to stop being the quiet mother who was always overlooked. I had the strength now, the courage. The only question was, how far would I go to get what I deserved? I woke up early that morning, the sun barely creeping through the blinds. It was one of those mornings where the weight of the world seemed a little heavier, pressing down on me like a blanket I couldn't shake off. The silence in the house felt different today. Still, but charged, like the calm before a storm. My coffee sat untouched on the kitchen counter as I stared out the window, lost in thought. Arletha's words from the previous day echoed in my head, still sharp, still stinging. But this time, it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me, about how much I'd allowed myself to be invisible, pushed aside for so long. And now, here I was, standing at a crossroads. I had a choice. I could walk away from it all and let the tide keep pushing me back into the shadows, or I could stand up, fight, and make sure my voice was heard. I wasn't sure which path I'd take. The decision felt bigger than just the custody battle. It was about everything, about reclaiming my dignity, my worth, and most importantly, my son's future. The fear in my chest was real, but so was the determination. I remembered my mother's voice from years ago. If you don't stand for yourself, no one will. Those words hadn't meant much to me when I was younger, but today, they felt like a lifeline. I could almost hear her now, calm and unshakable, teaching me to choose my battles wisely, to fight silently, but effectively. But there was a hesitation in me, a doubt I couldn't shake. I thought back to a time when I made a choice, a decision that had cost me dearly. The last time I tried to stand up, I lost everything. I had been crushed, left with nothing but the ruins of my attempts. I shook my head. That was in the past. I wasn't that woman anymore. I couldn't afford to make the same mistake again. I thought about Marcus. He needed me. The weight of that thought pressed harder than anything else. This wasn't just about Arletha or the case, it was about Marcus, about protecting his future. The last thing I wanted was to watch him suffer because I was too afraid to act. My hands clenched into fists. I wasn't going to be afraid anymore. I was going to fight. Later that day, I found myself walking through the streets, the weight of my decision still heavy on my shoulders. The world seemed quieter today, and for once it was a relief. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, but I wasn't sure what. I needed someone to talk to, someone who understood me, and so I made my way to the diner where I knew Martha would be. She had been my friend for years, always a steady presence in my life. We'd been through a lot together, and I knew I could count on her to tell me the truth. The familiar smell of coffee and warm pastries greeted me as I stepped inside. Martha was already seated at a booth, her smile warm but knowing. She'd seen the toll this whole mess had taken on me, and I knew she understood the weight on my heart. "Viola," she greeted me with a hug. "How are you holding up?" I sat down, taking a deep breath. "It's a lot. I don't know what to do anymore. I thought I had the strength to handle it, but I'm not so sure now." Martha nodded, taking a sip from her coffee. I've seen you face down worse. You've always been strong, even when you didn't believe it. But this isn't just about Arletha, is it? It's about you. I hesitated, then admitted, it's like every time I try to stand up for myself, I lose. I tried it once before and it destroyed me. I'm not sure if I can handle that again. She gave me a soft smile, her eyes full of understanding. You've been through so much, Viola. You've carried more than most people ever will. But you're stronger than you think. I know it. And if you don't fight for yourself, who will? You're the only one who can do this. For you, for Marcus, for all of them. Her words struck deep. She was right. I had spent too long taking the back seat, letting everyone else make decisions for me. I had sacrificed too much of myself. But now it was time to make sure I wasn't invisible anymore. You're right, I said quietly. I've been invisible for too long. It's time for me to be seen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about everything. The fight, the decision, Marcus, everything. I had been a mother for so long that I forgot who I was before all of this. I had forgotten about the woman who had dreams, who had hopes and ambitions outside of taking care of everyone else. I thought about my grandmother, how she always used to tell me, they can break your body, but not your will. She was right. No matter how many times I'd been knocked down, I'd always gotten back up. But it was time to stop fighting with my fists and start fighting with my voice. I remembered a moment from my youth when I had stood up for myself against all odds. It wasn't a big victory, but it had been enough to show me what I was capable of. And now I had to tap into that strength again. It was time to stop being afraid. The next day, I met with Marcus. He was quieter than usual, his eyes filled with concern. Mom, he began softly, I need to tell you something. I looked at him, puzzled. What is it? I know about Arletha, I know what she's been doing, and I don't think it's just the custody battle we're fighting anymore. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Marcus took a deep breath. She's in deeper than you realize. There's stuff she's been hiding, things that could ruin everything. I felt the weight of his words, the gravity of what this meant. What kind of stuff? I can't go into details, but I'm telling you, we're not just fighting for custody anymore. We're fighting to protect ourselves. My mind raced as the pieces began to fall into place. I wasn't just standing up for me, I was standing up for all of us. The family meeting was the next day. The air was thick with tension as Arletha sat across from me, her eyes narrowing when she saw the change in my demeanor. She tried to provoke me, throwing subtle insults my way, trying to make me feel small, but I wouldn't back down. I stood my ground, meeting her sharp words with calm, measured responses. And when she mentioned something about my past, I didn't flinch. Instead, I dropped a small but telling comment about her financial dealings, things I knew she had been hiding. Her face faltered just for a second. I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes, and I knew I had her. Is that so? I said, a quiet confidence in my voice. I didn't know you were involved in such things. Funny how secrets have a way of coming to light. The room fell silent. The tension was palpable, but no one dared to speak up. They all knew what I had just done. The seed of doubt had been planted. As I left the family meeting, I felt a strange sense of power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to speak up, to take control of my destiny. But as I walked out of the building, my phone rang. I hesitated before answering. The voice on the other end was familiar, but I hadn't heard it in years. I know what you're doing, Viola, the voice said. And you've just made a powerful enemy. You've been watched, and you're in more danger than you think. I froze. My heart raced as the words sunk in. The fight was far from over. And now I had no idea who I could trust. The morning after my decision felt heavier than I expected. I woke up to the same stillness in the house, but it was a different kind of silence now, one that weighed on me. The call from the mysterious source the night before still echoed in my mind, like a warning I couldn't ignore. I thought about what had been said, about Arletha's dark dealings, about the power she held, and how those secrets could either make or break this fight for my son. The battle I had just started felt a lot more dangerous than I initially realized. I tried to shake the feeling of dread settling in my stomach. Maybe I had made the right decision, but I couldn't help but wonder if I was stepping into something bigger than I was ready for. I had taken control. I had stood up for myself in that courtroom. But now, the real consequences were beginning to sink in. I wasn't just fighting for my son anymore. This was about my own survival, too. The weight of the day pressed down on me, and as I sipped my coffee, the phone rang again. This time, it was a letter, a physical letter, dropped off on my doorstep. The envelope was plain, nothing special about it, except for the way my name was scrawled across the front in a hurried hand. I opened it carefully, my fingers trembling slightly. Inside, there was a simple note that read, "Stop before it's too late. The truth will cost you more than you think." My heart skipped a beat. Who could possibly know what I was doing? Who was behind this message? The feeling of being watched, followed, lingered in the air like a bad omen. I crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash, trying to push the unease from my mind. I'd gone this far. There was no turning back now. But deep down, I knew that things were about to get a lot harder. The day was spent in solitude, with only my thoughts to keep me company. I couldn't escape the heavy weight of what I was doing. I had spent so many years as the quiet one, the one who kept her head down and played the part. But now I was fighting for something bigger than myself. I was fighting for Marcus, for my family, and for the dignity I had long been denied. As I reflected, my mind wandered back to the past. The times when I kept my silence to avoid conflict. The times when I swallowed my pride and did what I had to for the sake of peace. There were days when I thought maybe silence was the best choice. But my mother had always said, silence is survival, but it isn't living. And that's when I realized it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was ready to live. I could hear her voice, as clear as if she were sitting beside me. I could see her face, weathered but wise, urging me to find my strength, to speak up. It was time. It was time to stop hiding. Later that evening, as I sat alone in my living room, I thought about Marcus. He had seen me as the silent fighter, the woman who kept everything together even when it felt like the world was falling apart, but I hadn't been honest with him. I hadn't told him the full truth about what I was up against. When I finally sat down with him, his eyes reflected the concern I had expected. "Mom," he said softly, his voice tinged with worry, "I don't want to see you lose yourself in this fight." I shook my head, trying to ease his fears. "I'm not losing myself, Marcus. I'm fighting for you, for the family." But his next words struck me. "I know more than you think, Mom. I know about Arletha. She's got more control over this than we realize. She's been manipulating everything." I stared at him, stunned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated but then spoke, his voice low. "She's in deep. It's not just the custody case. There's a lot more going on. You don't know how far she's gone." My heart raced. I had no idea what he meant, but I knew one thing for sure. The fight wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about everything, about family, about truth, about survival. The next day I ran into Arletha at a family gathering. The air was thick with tension as she approached me, her eyes filled with that familiar disdain. She was trying to provoke me again, throwing subtle jabs at me in front of everyone. It was the same old game, but this time, I wasn't backing down. I stood tall, matching her words with sharp, measured responses. Her usual tactics weren't working. I could see the frustration building in her eyes as I refused to flinch. And then I did something I hadn't done before. I mentioned something only she knew. Her financial dealings, the things she thought no one would find out. I didn't directly accuse her, but I planted the seed. I let her know I was aware of what she was hiding. Her face faltered. For a split second, I saw the fear flicker in her eyes. She wasn't expecting that. "I know more than you think," I said quietly, my words hanging in the air like a warning. The room went quiet. No one said a word. They all sensed the shift, the power I had just claimed. As I left the family gathering that night, I felt a strange sense of power. I wasn't afraid anymore. But just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. It was an unexpected call. I answered. The voice on the other end familiar, but not one I had heard in years. It was someone from my past, someone who had witnessed all the lies, all the manipulation that Arletha had been pulling behind the scenes. "They've been watching you, Viola," the voice said, "and I've got the proof you need, but be careful. This isn't just about you anymore. There's someone else involved in all of this." I took a deep breath. The information was powerful, but it came with a warning. It could tear everything apart. The next few hours were spent reflecting on my next steps. I had a choice to make. I could use this new information, expose Arletha's lies, and take back control of the custody case. But I also knew that doing so could destroy the fragile relationships within my family. As I looked at a photo of Marcus, I realized something. This fight wasn't just for me. It was for him. It was for his future. For our future. I had no choice. I had to use the document. I stood outside the courthouse, feeling the weight of the decision on my shoulders. But just as I was about to enter, a family member approached me with news that shattered everything. "Arletha's turned it around," they said. "She's got something on you. Something that could destroy everything you've worked for." I felt the world shift beneath my feet. This wasn't just about Arletha anymore. It was about protecting my family from a betrayal I never saw coming. The morning was quiet, still. I woke up to the soft hum of the world outside, but inside, everything felt like it was on the edge of breaking. The weight of the past few days pressed heavily on my chest, the decisions I had made clawing at me, trying to tear away my resolve. I had taken control, but with control came consequences. The final confrontation with Arletha was approaching fast, and I knew it was going to change everything. I stood in the kitchen, staring out of the window, trying to gather strength. The house was empty, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. It felt like the calm before the storm. The silence was deafening. I thought about everything that had led me to this point. The phone call from the mysterious source, the anonymous letter, the documents I had in my possession that could unravel everything Arletha had worked so hard to keep hidden. The fight was no longer just about custody. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my family's future. I was standing at the crossroads, knowing there was no turning back. Then my phone rang. It was my lawyer. "Viola, we need to talk," he said, his voice tense. "They're already preparing to use your past against you. They're going to try and twist your history, make you out to be someone you're not. You need to be ready." I felt a chill run through me. I had expected this, but hearing it made it real. They were going to play dirty. Arletha wasn't going to give up without a fight, but neither was I. "I'll be ready," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. After I hung up, I stood there for a moment, the weight of what was coming sinking deeper. This was it. The battle was no longer just about my son. It was about me. I had to stand up for myself. I spent the rest of the day reflecting, replaying the events of my past in my mind. I thought about all the years I spent raising my children, the sacrifices I made, the long hours at work, the emotional neglect. The days I spent holding the family together, only to be dismissed and overlooked by those I loved the most. I remembered when Arletha was just a child, the moments when I'd go above and beyond for her, and she'd barely look up from whatever it was that caught her attention. I had spent so many years being invisible, pretending like I didn't care. But the truth was, it hurt. It hurt like hell. And then I remembered a moment I had tried to forget. The time Arletha mocked me in front of the whole family. She tore into me, called me weak, said I was a failure, that I'd never amount to anything. The words still stung, even now. But today, they didn't feel like a dagger to the heart. They felt like fuel. I wasn't just fighting for Marcus anymore. I was fighting for me, fighting for every woman who'd been silenced, overlooked, and dismissed. The day of the hearing arrived, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. I was ready. Arletha had no idea what she was about to face. When I walked into the courtroom, I could feel the tension in the air. Arletha was already there, sitting with her lawyer, smirking like she had already won. She thought she had the upper hand, but I wasn't going to let her think that for long. I stood tall, holding the documents I had prepared. This wasn't just about the paper. It was about making my presence known. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. Arletha looked up and her eyes narrowed. She knew something was different, but she was still playing her games. "I'm going to win this," she whispered, barely audible, but I caught it. "We'll see," I said, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. Just as the hearing started, she pulled out a surprise. A witness. A family member who was ready to testify against me. The shockwave hit me hard, but I didn't flinch. I knew this was coming, but I was ready for it. When it was finally my turn to speak, I stood and walked to the front of the courtroom, holding my head high. The room fell silent. I began with a calm, measured tone, recalling everything I had done for my children, all the sacrifices I had made, all the hours I spent working, trying to keep everything together. And then I dropped the bombshell. I revealed the documents, proof of Arletha's illegal dealings, her manipulations, her deceit. The room went completely still. The evidence spoke for itself. I wasn't just fighting for my son's custody anymore. I was fighting to expose the truth. But I didn't stop there. I turned to Arletha and let her have it. "You've played your games for long enough," I said. "I've been invisible for far too long. I'm not afraid anymore." I could feel the power shift in the room. Arletha's face went pale as the realization hit her. The tide had turned. After the judge called for a brief recess, I stepped outside to collect myself. My heart was racing, but I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control of my life. But just as I was about to walk away, my lawyer pulled me aside. "Viola, you need to know something," he said. "Arletha is making one last attempt. She's trying to use emotional manipulation to sway the case." I felt the air leave my lungs. I couldn't let this happen. Not now. Not after everything I had been through. I walked back into the courtroom, ready for the final push. The judge stood up, ready to give the final ruling. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for whatever came next. Arletha's last attempt to manipulate the system was desperate, but I knew my case was stronger. I watched the judge carefully as they began to speak. The decision was coming, and I was bracing myself for what would change everything. The morning arrived slowly, with the quiet stillness of dawn wrapping around me like a blanket. I woke up early, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I'd been here before, standing at the edge of something monumental, knowing that the decisions I made today would change everything. Today, I was going to fight. I walked into the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked tired, but there was something else behind them. Strength. I had spent years feeling like I was invisible, like my voice didn't matter, like my existence was meant to be overlooked, but no more. Today, I was going to make sure I was seen. I wasn't just fighting for my son anymore. I was fighting for myself. For the first time in a long time, I was going to stand tall. The memories of the past flooded my mind, reminding me of everything I'd endured. Years of sacrifice, years of being belittled, years of my own daughter's ridicule. Arletha had always tried to make me feel small, as if my role as a mother wasn't enough. But today, I would show her just how much power I had within me. As I stood there, I heard a knock on the door. It was my old friend Shirley. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the fallout that had driven us apart. But today, she was standing in front of me, as if the universe had brought us together at this very moment. She stepped inside and took a deep breath, her eyes locking with mine. "Viola," she said softly, "I've been watching. I know what you're doing, and I just want you to know. You've come a long way. You've always had this fire inside of you, even when you didn't know it. Don't let anyone put that fire out." Her words hit me hard. It was as if she was reminding me of the woman I used to be, the woman who wasn't afraid to take risks, to stand up for what was right. "I'm scared, Shirley," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't back down now. Not after everything I've been through, not after everything Arletha has put me through." Shirley nodded. "You've got this, Viola. I've got your back. But you need to remember one thing. No matter how it ends, you've already won. You've fought for yourself. Don't let anyone make you feel small again." The tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back. I wasn't going to cry today. Today was about strength, and I wasn't going to waste any of it on sorrow. I walked through my daily routine, but my mind was consumed by thoughts of my children, especially Arletha. I couldn't help but think back to the days when she was a little girl, full of hope, full of love. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Somewhere along the way, she'd become this woman who could tear me down without a second thought. I thought about the moment when she mocked me in front of the family, calling me weak, calling me a failure. Her words still stung, but today they didn't hurt me the way they used to. Instead, they fueled me. She didn't know it yet, but today was going to be different. Today, I would make sure she knew exactly who I was. My hands shook as I held a family heirloom, a necklace that had been passed down through generations. My mother had worn it, and my grandmother before her. The weight of it in my hands reminded me of the strength they'd both possessed. My mother had always told me, silence is survival, but it isn't living. I had survived for too long in silence. But now, I was ready to live. I took a deep breath and left the house, feeling a new sense of purpose. The courthouse loomed ahead, and I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't just fighting for my son's custody anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. I was fighting for every woman who had been told she wasn't enough. When I entered the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted. Arletha was already seated, her smug expression barely hiding her confidence. She thought she had won. She thought she had me beat, but she was wrong. I stood tall, my spine straight, my head held high. The judge entered, and the tension in the room was palpable. Arletha's lawyer began trying to paint me as the villain, accusing me of being unfit, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not anymore. I stood and calmly addressed the court, recounting the truth. I told them about the sacrifices I had made, the long hours I had worked to provide for my children, the nights I spent awake, wondering if I was doing enough. And then I dropped the bombshell. I pulled out the documents, proof of Arletha's financial misconduct, evidence of her lies. The room went silent as the weight of the truth settled in. Arletha's smirk faltered, but it didn't end there. Arletha, desperate, tried to manipulate the situation further. She called a surprise witness, a family member who was ready to testify against me. I could feel the room tense, but I was ready. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground and I spoke the truth. As I told my story, Arletha's facade began to crack. Her voice shook, her confidence waning with every word I spoke. I could see the fear in her eyes. For the first time, she wasn't in control. And then, in a final outburst, she accused me of betraying her, of never being there for her when she needed me. But her words felt hollow. The courtroom could see it too. They could see the truth. As the judge called for a recess, I stepped outside the courtroom, my body exhausted, but my spirit stronger than ever. I had done it. I had turned the tables. But the fight wasn't over yet. I stood alone, gathering my thoughts, when my lawyer approached me. "Viola, we need to be careful," he said. "Arletha's team is trying to turn the tables again. They're questioning your credibility, suggesting you're unstable. We need to be ready." I felt the weight of his words, but I refused to back down. I had fought too hard. I was ready for whatever came next. I walked back into the courtroom, my heart pounding, but my resolve unshaken. The judge was about to give their final ruling. I knew that whatever happened next, everything was about to change. The silence outside the courtroom was deafening. I stood there, the weight of the day pressing down on me, my heart racing with uncertainty and anticipation. The final decision was near, and everything I had worked for, the sacrifices, the years of silence, the pain, was about to be judged. Would I finally reclaim my dignity, my voice, and my son's future, or would it all slip through my fingers? I closed my eyes for a moment, letting my thoughts wander back to the long road I had traveled, the strength my mother had shown me, the resilience passed down through generations, the years of trying to make everyone else happy while my own needs went unmet. I thought of my mother, the one who never backed down, who always fought for what was right, even when the world tried to silence her. And now, here I wasn't just fighting for my son anymore, I was fighting for myself, for my worth. No more being invisible. Just then, I was jolted back to the present by the sound of footsteps approaching. I turned to find my sister Lynn standing there. She hadn't been around much during the case. Her absence had stung, but now she was here. "I'm sorry," she said softly, stepping closer. "I should have been here for you. I should have supported you." The apology was unexpected, and it hit me harder than I anticipated. We hadn't spoken much in years, but in that moment it was like a weight lifted from my chest. Lynn was here now, and her presence, though late, gave me the final push I needed. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "I've come this far without anyone's help. But now I'm ready." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "You've got this. I see you, Viola. You've always been stronger than I ever knew." I breathed in deeply, a calm resolve settling over me. Today was the end of the line, and I was ready. As I stepped into the courtroom, the air thick with tension, I felt the eyes of everyone on me. Arletha was already seated, her gaze sharp and defiant, her posture radiating confidence. She thought she had won, but she didn't know what was coming. I walked to the stand, my steps sure, my back straight. This time there was no fear. I wasn't here to beg for validation. I was here to take back what was mine. The judge called the session to order, and the opposing lawyer began his spiel, trying to paint me as the villain. He threw accusations of abandonment, of neglect, hoping to twist the narrative in Arletha's favor. I felt the weight of the lies in the air, but I wasn't rattled. When it was my turn, I stood up. My voice, when I spoke, was steady and strong. I was never the one to abandon. I was the one left behind, I said, my words cutting through the tension like a knife. The room went silent as I spoke the truth, how Arletha had been the one to walk away when I needed her most, how she had discarded me and then had the audacity to accuse me of the same. The hypocrisy was glaring, and it was time for everyone to see it. I stood my ground as Arletha's eyes flickered with panic, her facade beginning to crack. I was finally being heard. I continued recounting the story of my life, the hardships, the sacrifices, the endless nights spent working to keep my family together while never once asking for help. I spoke of my love, of my devotion to my children, and of the strength I had shown through it all. The room was still as I dropped the documents, financial records, photos, text messages, proof of Arletha's deceit. The evidence hit like a thunderclap, and the murmurs began to rise around the courtroom. I could see Arletha's composure crumble as the truth of her actions unfolded before everyone. I stood taller, my chest swelling with a pride I hadn't known I'd missed. This was my moment. I wasn't just defending my son, I was defending myself, my dignity. But just as I thought I had control, Arletha's mask completely shattered. She couldn't hold it together any longer. Her tears fell freely as she stood and shouted, her voice cracking. "I didn't understand," she cried, her words heavy with guilt. "I always thought you were weak, that you couldn't handle it. But I was wrong. I see it now. You were always the strongest one." Her vulnerability was unexpected, and for a moment it left the room speechless. I stood frozen, watching as the woman who had tormented me for years finally admitted that she had failed to see me. But even as I watched her break down, I didn't feel joy. I felt a deep sadness. My own daughter had been the one to tear me down, and now it was too late to fix the damage. The judge called for a recess, and I stepped outside to collect my thoughts. And my body felt heavy, but my mind was racing. I had given everything I had in that room, but would it be enough? I walked in a daze, trying to quiet my mind. It was hard to tell where the judge stood. I knew he was known for his fairness, but that didn't ease the tension in my chest. Was it enough? Just as I tried to steady myself, my lawyer called. "Viola, stay strong. There's some uncertainty in there. They're trying to discredit you, questioning your stability, but don't lose faith. You've made your case. Just hold on a little longer." His words were both reassuring and anxiety-inducing. I had already come this far. There was no turning back now. When the judge returned, the air was thick with anticipation. The moment I'd been waiting for had arrived. I took my seat, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. The judge cleared his throat, and after a moment of silence, he spoke. "The custody case is resolved. Viola wins. Her son will remain with her." A wave of relief washed over me, but it wasn't the victory I had expected. It wasn't a loud celebration. It was a quiet, bittersweet triumph. This battle had cost me more than I could ever put into words. Arletha stood, defeated, but not broken. She took a step toward me and, with a voice tinged with regret, spoke. "I've never understood you, Mom, but I see you now." I nodded, the words not coming as easily as I thought they would. I accepted her apology without bitterness, without the need for vengeance. I didn't need her approval anymore. The wounds of the past were still there, but I had learned to let them go. Outside the courtroom, I stood with my son's hand in mine. The battle was finally over. The weight of it lifted, but the journey wasn't finished. As we walked to the car, I felt the quiet weight of closure settle over me. But there was something else, a deep, reflective understanding that the story was far from over. I wasn't done. And I opened the envelope my lawyer handed me, a letter from my mother's estate. It was a final piece of the past, something I could now leave behind. As the car pulled away, I looked out the window, knowing that the next chapter of my life was just beginning. I had fought for my family. I had fought for myself. And now, I was ready for whatever came next. The drive home was quiet, the weight of the last few days settling heavily between my son and me. His small hand rested in mine as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my racing thoughts. We had won. I had fought so hard for this moment, for him, for my dignity. But as the sound of the tires on the road hummed beneath us, the sense of triumph felt muted, like something still lingered in the air. I glanced at him, his innocent face blissfully unaware of the complexities of what had just happened. For him, it was simple. It was over. He was safe. And that was enough. But for me, the past had a strange way of clinging on, no matter how much I tried to leave it behind. I let my gaze drift to the window, watching the world pass by in a blur. I couldn't help but reflect on the long journey that had brought me here. Years of silence, of being pushed aside, of sacrificing everything for everyone else. I thought of my mother, her strength, her resilience, and how her lessons had shaped me, even if I didn't fully realize it at the time. But now I knew. The fight wasn't just for him, it was for me too. As we approached the house, I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter from the court. The final decision was in black and white. My heart gave a little lurch as I held it in my hands. A small part of me felt vindicated, like I had finally been given what I deserved. But as I scanned the words again, there was a sense of unease that crept in. Even with the victory, there were things within me left unresolved. The next few days were a whirlwind. The courtroom was behind me, but the emotional aftermath lingered, like a storm waiting to pass. I woke up each day unsure of how to move forward, unsure of how to reconcile the woman I had become with the person I had been before all of this. I wasn't a victim anymore, but the scars from the years of mistreatment, the betrayal, and the emotional neglect still haunted me. Sitting on my bed one afternoon, I caught my reflection in the mirror. There was a woman I didn't recognize staring back. She was stronger, more confident, but still fragile in ways that only the ones who'd been broken could understand. I felt a wave of self-doubt rush over me. Was this really enough? Could I truly move past the pain and rebuild what had been lost? The decision to fight had cost me, but it had also liberated me. I had reclaimed my son, but the question still nagged at me. Could I heal from the years of hurt? Could I ever truly forgive and forget? I thought of Arletha and the complex relationship we'd always had. My daughter, she was the one who had broken me, yet the one I couldn't let go of. Our history together was a tangled mess of love and resentment. Was it possible to fix that? Or was I destined to always be haunted by the past? The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Arletha. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment I didn't know whether to pick up. She hadn't been a part of my life in a meaningful way for so long, but now she wanted to apologize. She wanted closure, or at least that's what she said. I sat down on the couch, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. What would this conversation mean for me? Could I truly forgive her, or would it just reopen old wounds? When I agreed to meet, it was with a mix of hesitation and curiosity. As I walked into the coffee shop, I saw her sitting there, her eyes tired but sincere. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two people who had once been family, now strangers. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, her voice raw. "I've been awful to you. I didn't get it then, and I'm sorry." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to believe her, to accept her apology. But there was something missing. She was apologizing, but not truly understanding the depth of what she had done. She was still defensive, as if part of her still didn't get why I had carried so much pain. I looked her in the eye, the anger and hurt I'd carried for so long finally bubbling to the surface. "You can say sorry, Arletha, but words mean nothing unless they're followed by understanding and change. I've been carrying your weight for too long. I've been invisible for too long." For the first time, I spoke those words that had been lodged in my chest for years. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to apologize for them. As I left that conversation, something shifted inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her. Not at anyone. I was just tired. Tired of carrying the past on my shoulders like it was some kind of badge of honor. I had fought for my son, for my dignity, but it was time to fight for myself now. It was time to let go of the bitterness that had consumed me for so long. In the quiet moments that followed, I took to journaling. I wrote letters to myself, to my younger self, to the woman I had once been. I wrote to my mother, the woman whose lessons had shaped me, but whose absence still left a void in my heart. Writing became a release, a way to untangle the emotions I'd never allowed myself to feel. One afternoon, I visited my mother's grave. Standing there, I felt a strange peace wash over me. I laid flowers down, and in that moment, I released all the resentment that had held me captive for so long. I had carried it for years, but now, I was ready to let go. It was time to honor her memory, but it was also time to move beyond it. That evening, as I stood in front of the mirror once more, something had changed. I wasn't the same woman who had entered that courtroom months ago. I wasn't the same woman who had been drowned by the weight of her family's expectations. I had survived, and in surviving I had become stronger. My thoughts turned to the generations of women who came before me, strong, resilient women who had fought battles of their own. I was part of that legacy now, no longer a victim, but a woman who had fought for her place in this world, not just for my son, but for myself. But as I stood there, staring at my reflection, I knew that this was just the beginning. The hardest part was behind me, but the future was still unwritten. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find a stranger standing there. Someone from my past, someone I never thought I'd see again. They were here, asking for forgiveness. I stood at the threshold, unsure of what to say or do. This was the test. Could I truly move beyond the past, or was it going to haunt me forever? Only time would tell.